Hi, everyone. This panel is called Crypto and the Environment, a very hot topic, a problem to solve. That's the official title. So I want to jump right in because we have a lot of interesting stuff to cover. This has obviously been a topic for a long time in the industry, and it's generally used. The topic of the environment is obviously generally used as a critique of the cryptocurrency industry and something negative. So we hope to break down some of those myths and stereotypes and just dig in a little deeper. So first things first is obviously I would like to introduce myself and the panelists briefly. I am head of content at OKX, which is a big cryptocurrency exchange and ecosystem. I will pass on the intro to Shiti first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Olivia. Pleased to be here with everyone. My name is Shiti. I serve as Chief Marketing Officer at Stepn. A little bit about Stepn, for those who don't know. We are a Web3 fitness app that employee move to earn. So essentially, users download our app from Apple App Store or Android App Store and then buy NFT sneakers. And as they walk, jog, or run, they can earn NFT tokens, badges, rewards. We have 2 tokens, GST and GMT, that they earn in the app, leveling up, minting new sneakers, and several in-game features. And we have 3 missions that are dear to us. One is nudging millions, if not billions of people to healthy lifestyles, while connecting them to Web3, so building this bridge, the holy grail between Web 2 and Web 3, and last but not the least, contribute positively towards carbon neutrality. So as we onboard more users, we are now 800,000 daily active users, 3 million monthly users, over 50 million NFT sales daily. We make sure that we're reaching out to not just crypto natives, but non-crypto natives. A third of our users are non-crypto natives, and making sure that it happens outside. There's a reason why our app doesn't work in the gyms, because we want people to move outdoors with their friends, families, pets, in a social setting. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we do towards carbon neutrality a bit down the line. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Shiti. Okay, so Raphaël, you can go ahead next.
Thanks. My name is Raphaël. I'm one of the founders at Toucan Protocol and the CEO. Toucan Protocol is a project that builds bridges also. So you mentioned bridges. We built a bridge between the off-chain carbon registries and the on-chain carbon market. So really our goal is to build technology that can unlock climate action at scale. And we've launched last year in October, and since have bridged 22 million carbon credits onto the Polygon network, and we're now going multi-chain in the direction of Celo next, and have like other goals that I think we can touch on probably later. But yeah, in general, I think what we're excited about is really to use crypto to address climate change, and so it's the perfect panel to be on because crypto has this bad rap. I think personally that crypto has a role to play in solving climate change because climate change is a coordination failure and a market failure. And we have the opportunity with crypto to use smart contracts and other coordination mechanisms to address it. And I'll leave it there, but I'm really excited to be here and dig a little bit deeper into this topic.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Andre, our final panelist.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you very much for being on the panel. My name is Andre Vanyi-Robin, CEO and founder of Plastiks and parent company Nozama. Plastiks is a marketplace where waste management companies, recycling companies, consumer brands, consumers, and artists come together to reduce waste and plastic specifically in the environment. Our vision is that all plastic production across the world has to be identified and traceable, and all parties using, consuming, or distributing plastic have to be accountable. We currently have more than 15,000 tons of plastics reduced and recovered from the environment, and we're operating in Africa, Australia, Latin America, North America, and Europe. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So as you can see, our panel is very qualified to talk about sustainability and the environment in crypto. Before we dig into the first questions, I just want to mention for anyone watching that we will be taking questions from the audience in the last 5 minutes of this discussion. We will, it's a 30-minute panel. So in about 20 minutes, you can share your questions. I believe there's a Discord for that. So I will jump right in so we can start. So we're going to talk about proof of work, proof of stake, and we're going to talk about NFTs for sure. That's obviously the new big topic in crypto that people are criticizing for its environmental impact. Bitcoin has bared the brunt of that for the whole time before. So just to set the stage, right? If the kind of overall commonly used argument against cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, a proof of work system, or many NFTs, is that they are bad for the environment, destroying the planet. Just can anyone give their take on that question? Sort of, is that the right question to ask? And from there, we can move into sort of like how your projects are addressing it.
I just want to establish first up that energy consumption is not equivalent to carbon emissions. There's an important distinction to be made: how much energy a system consumes and how much carbon it emits. For example, 1 unit of hydro energy will have a much less environmental impact than, say, a unit of coal-powered energy. So you can calculate Bitcoin's energy consumption relatively easily with hash rate, which is the total combined computational power used to mine Bitcoin and process translations. And then you can make some educated guess as to energy requirements of the hardware that miners are using. But requirements of this then vary as to what source of renewable energy does this consumption that take. So for example, one report suggests that 73% of Bitcoin's energy consumption was carbon neutral. And then the next year, a report suggests 39% is carbon renewable. So there's lack of data verification, and there's a lot of variability. And there's a poor correlation between consumption and environmental impact. I mean, there are several sources that are now being used. Hydro is a good one. Flared natural gas is a good one. There's differentiation between wet climates and the dry climates. I mean, the two states in China which are now big centers for this energy, for Bitcoin mining. That's for a reason, because they're able to use hydro. The point I'm trying to make is that it's important to differentiate, and Web3 can be used to counter the worst of Web3. And in fact, I'd invite Raphaël, who's much more qualified to talk about this than I am, because he's building on it. And then maybe I can talk about how Stepn is contributing towards it.
Thanks, Shiti. It's a great foundation to lay. And I can take it one step further, because I spend a lot of time trying to understand the carbon footprint of one transaction and how to attribute how to attribute a carbon footprint from one transaction to the person. And it's extremely difficult, right? Because what the thing that many people have done, like in the case of Ethereum, is to use the gas that is being used for a transaction, for instance, to say, okay, this represents the utility that a user, it represents kind of the space, the block space that somebody is consuming. And so you can attribute that to the person, submitting the transaction. It's their carbon footprint. But if you dig a little deeper, it's like, what are really the things that drive the emissions of a layer 1 blockchain? It's really, as you said, the hash rate, and the hash rate increases when the price increases also, right? So there's an argument to be made that like somebody buying a cryptocurrency, which moves the price up significantly, is actually, creating incentives for miners to come online, which increases the carbon footprint. And somebody selling, right now, like the price is going down, is like, it's really good for the environment in a way, right? So there's these, like, it's really hard. What I'm trying to get at is it's really hard to attribute the emissions that come from Web3 to a single transaction or even to a single user. So I'm saying this because I believe that we need to systemically look at these systems and how can we get these systems to be carbon neutral. Because it's so hard to like say, you have to offset this much, or you have to do this, or you have to do this. But the beauty, as you said, Shiti, is like we can use Web3 to do that, right? So Toucan, for instance, bringing carbon credits on chain, it's a great way to drive climate finance directly to projects to reduce carbon emissions. And since they're tokens, we can use them to programmatically offset emissions. But obviously, offsetting is not, like a solution for everything. So I think, thinking about ways to reduce the emission should be the first step. And the second step is like all the emissions that we cannot get rid of is to offset those. But just like highlighting what Shiti said, the data is still extremely poor because we don't know where all these miners sit, which makes it really hard.
I personally think the question is one of a business model question. We all use email. There was a point in time before most of you were born where email did not exist, and now it's inexorably part of our lives. And we don't question its usage. We just try to measure its carbon impact. And obviously, to reduce the email carbon impact is, use less email, make sure the energy on the servers is renewable, etc. Email responded to a need, a business need, a cultural need, and just as blockchain is responding to a need that the world is inexorably going towards. So the question of whether it's good or bad for the environment, I think is a question that should be transferred into how can we minimize its impact until the real question of renewable energy permeating through all aspects of society is achieved. Because in the meantime, the economy evolves. In the meantime, society demands the functionalities of blockchain. In the meantime, society demands the functionalities of Web 3.0. And therefore, what can we do to minimize the evolution of society? Well, the offsetting, as Raphaël and Shiti have said, and this is one of the reasons why we chose Silo blockchain, because for the time being, we can offset, obviously, the transactions that we're doing, but also from a perspective of really trying to build a model that will fund the regenerative projects. And in the terms of plastics wastes, this is what we decide to focus on waste reduction through the financing mechanisms that the sale of the NFTs provides. And then obviously the real problem in our case is collect plastic. Make sure it doesn't go into the environment, make sure it doesn't go, make sure it's properly disposed of. Carbon emissions, make sure you're using renewable energies. But the responsibility is of mitigation, not of critique. It's the business plan that has to be taken into account. How can you use the technology to improve a need? And then obviously in the meantime, mitigate that impact whilst the energy industry provides the transition into renewable energy. So I think people who criticize blockchain for this, it's a cheap criticism because then criticize the internet, criticize industrialization. It's inexorably part of our society. We have to mitigate its damage until we have full renewable energy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important point about type of energy, right? The grid, the way that the grid works, and not just singling out crypto and blockchain as like needing to do more work than other industries and sectors in order to be sustainable. So in terms of like this, there is an argument that Bitcoin miners could say that proof of work is actually a way to do that. You hinted towards that. So a way to bring different renewable energy resources onto grids, to incentivize bringing them onto grids, because that would otherwise be potentially unprofitable. Basically, that's like the debate that's happening. So I'm wondering what you think of that argument that Bitcoin, obviously the biggest proof of work cryptocurrency, could be the key to reducing reliance on fossil fuels, could encourage reducing reliance on fossil fuels.
I think, yes, both in terms of resources and kind of energies that we use, as well as the geolocations, because the key thing is Bitcoin can use energy that other industries can't. What I mean by that is almost all of the energy currently being used worldwide must be produced relatively close to the end users. Whereas Bitcoin doesn't have such limitation, which enables miners to utilize power sources that are inaccessible for most other applications. And like I was saying, hydro is a good example of that. In the wet season, for example, the two provinces, Sichuan and Yunnan, enormous quantities of renewable hydro energy are wasted every single year. In these areas, production capacity massively outpaces local demand, and battery technology is right now not mature enough to make it worthwhile to store and transport energy from these rural areas to the urban centers that need it. And therefore, what has happened is that these regions most likely represent the single largest stranded energy resource on the planet. And therefore, what happened is that it's not a coincidence that these provinces became the heartlands of mining in China. They're responsible for almost 10% of global Bitcoin mining in the dry season and 50% in the wet season. So there's a proof here. There's a case study here for us.
I think Nick Grossman wrote a point on like Bitcoin being a battery that I think kind of touches on that, which is Bitcoin being essentially an economic battery that allows people to transform energy that would otherwise have been wasted into value, right? Similar to how in Iceland they have a lot of like aluminium production, because the energy there is really cheap. Aluminium production is extremely energy intensive, and essentially producing aluminium is a way for them to transform energy into some value that can then easily be shipped, right? I think that's it's a really interesting take. I personally don't think that we're yet at the point where we can say Bitcoin is a solution to transitioning to a more regenerative or like carbon neutral society. I think we're still far away from that, because not all energy that is being used to mine is necessarily comes from waste energy that would otherwise have been wasted. And obviously, we also have to take the kind of life cycle of the mining rigs into consideration, right? Because there's like a cost also producing more and more like miners, like physical hardware. So I think it's a bit of oversimplification of a problem. But I think like everything in life, the answer is always like in the middle. There's like no black and white. And I think Bitcoin mining is not just bad for the environment, but it's also definitely not good for the environment. That's kind of my position. And for Toucan, we've taken the decision not to be in a proof of work blockchain for that reason, because it doesn't really make sense for us to build an infrastructure for a like Web3 native carbon market on a system that inherently burns energy to be alive.
Bitcoin is not the solution. It was born out of trying to find a mathematical solution to the problem of trust. And the Byzantine problem is one of them, obviously. So proof of stake is an evolutionary step towards mitigating the carbon footprint of the mathematical problem. And there will be new protocols over time that will evolve to mitigate the carbon footprint. So ultimately, in hindsight, the efforts of trying to justify the existence of Bitcoin in fitting it into some model, I think is not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is how can you solve the trust problem mathematically with the least energy footprint possible, and then supplying the proper energy that is renewable. So eventually, I see future generations of crypto evolving into close to zero emissions impact, and then obviously combining that with the renewable energy. So the responsibility of all miners is to get access to renewable energy. The responsibility of blockchainers is to come up with solutions mathematically that can emulate Bitcoin's solidity. And that, yes, Bitcoin is super solid in resolving the mathematical problem of trust. So ultimately, the big technical challenge is how can we evolve Bitcoin into going into the least carbon footprint calculation. That is my personal opinion.
Right. So I think the reason this debate is so important is because there could be different goals here, right? The reason that a blockchain would use proof of work is for security, or that primarily is the reason. So if we dig into, different use cases, for example, NFTs, digital ownership and items, do they also need the security properties of the most maximally decentralized type of network like Bitcoin, which is proof of work, which is the sort of the ultimate trustless system, as you described, or which makes sense for a global financial system, I would say, but for something like video game items or other use cases for digitally owned items on a blockchain, maybe they don't need the same security level. And I bring up security because when we talk about proof of work, proof of stake, I definitely think in the mainstream, there's potentially a lack of awareness as to, well, why would you choose the other one, right? Like, why don't you choose the green option? And this panel is all people who have projects on proof of stake blockchains. So I just wanted to balance it out and bring that up and sort of transition into the other, frame the use cases, and maybe talk about how this argument has been made against NFTs, how this argument about lack of sustainability is potentially stopping NFTs from gaining even more mainstream adoption. So that's where I want to throw the topic at this point.
I feel like I need to say something about it. So the topic of NFTs it's just that a different crowd has come to crypto. And this is why it's been getting more attention, right? Like this energy situation of like crypto has always been the topic, and it's just like NFTs, suddenly we have users that are more mindful of the environment, and this, I think, is why it's become more of a kind of topic to be discussed. I personally believe that we're not going to get to the next billion users if we don't solve the environmental problems that blockchains bring, right? Like if we don't decarbonize crypto, I think it has no future. That obviously, that's maybe a strong statement, but I really believe that if we look at like where the world goes in terms of like, both like from ESG, but also like the speed at which we like are driving towards the climate crisis, or maybe already in it. Like, I don't think that a system that doesn't address that and is kind of like blocking that out can survive in the long run. So I would really like urge everyone working in the industry to take this seriously, because I think it's a blocker for really the wide adoption of crypto, and we all want that, right? Because we all believe that this is a new way, a new paradigm, and a better system ultimately. But if we don't address the climate problem of it, then I don't think it can succeed. Then on the NFT side, I mean, we see a lot of NFT projects kind of shifting towards the edges, right? Of like going onto blockchains that are like less energy intensive, and I think there's good reasons for that. It's not only the environmental side of it, it's also the financial side of it, right? Because there's not just the carbon footprint, there's also the gas cost. And so I think for a lot of NFT applications, we don't actually need that level of security. And I think, Shiti, you can probably talk about this a lot more than I can, but for us, in it's Toucan systems, there's also NFTs, and like we're happy that we are on a chain where the cost of like minting an NFT is not really high, both the environmental cost as well as the economic cost. So that's just, and ultimately, like, I'm not sure that proof of work is necessarily safer than proof of stake, right? There's like, there's different arguments to that. There's different levels, how you can look at it. And if you look, so I wouldn't necessarily say that like the blockchain being proof of work makes it like 10 times safer than Ethereum, for instance, if it moves to proof of stake. But obviously that it still remains to be proven when the merge happens.
Cool. So I just quickly touch upon the 3 ways in which at Stepn we take this seriously and are doing efforts. Just to give context, when Stepn was conceived, there were Australian bushfires going on, and the founders were concerned about that in the backdrop of how we can do more in the blockchain ecosystem through gamification, through game apps, through health and lifestyle. So in the context of that, Stepn was born, and that's why these desire to contribute positively towards carbon neutrality is taken very seriously. So The first way we do this is commit $100,000 every month to remove carbon credits of blockchain in partnership with Nori. Second is, like Raphaël here suggested, we've built on Solana as well, which is a proof of stake chain, and therefore uses lesser energy than proof of work. And last but not the least, we have 3 million users going every month and over 150,000 users every minute running outdoors. There's a reason why our app doesn't work in gyms, indoors, or machines, because we want people to move outdoors. And in all of our offline events on ground, we see our community members coming from every country across Australia, Japan, Vietnam, US, UK, where they go outdoors and run with their families, children, pet. And it's very heartening to see this kind of impact directly on consumers. Over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Shiti. In the environment waste management industry, they make money two ways. They make money collecting garbage waste from municipal governments and private entities. And the second one is they separate the waste and they sell it after I've identified what waste can be sold as a prime resource or feedstock to the recycling companies so that they can do new packaging from recovered materials. We decided to create a utility of the NFT by converting the invoices that are generated during the course of this huge billion-dollar waste management industry that hasn't changed in 50 years by saying you can convert the proof that you've sold something as into an NFT. And therefore you will find an incentive, an economic incentive to become transparent across the world, so the world will know exactly what are you recovering and what types of plastics you're recovering. And then also by that additional revenue stream, by imposing via smart contract, a significant portion into green initiatives, where in developing nations, they can pass on the money to the pickers, who can also be incentivized to collect more waste and to sort of have a social impact by increasing their income. Therefore, sorry, the idea behind the utility NFT consists of really providing, sorry, that's good, Barcelona, the plantain tree.
The pollution, huh?
Sorry.
It's all the miners.
Yeah, sorry. The utility function ultimately of the NFT is to provide the guarantee that plastics have been recovered and to know how much and what type, and to provide these guarantees to the consumers and producers of plastics, so they precisely can not only do the proverbial offsetting of their plastic consumption, but more importantly, they can provide a new revenue source for the actual pickers in the areas that really need funding for this to happen. So this is how the NFT became for us a tool, because it is a business model more than a technology. It just so happened to be blockchain based, obviously, so you can trace it, you can track it, and you can prove that it's being verified. But from a business model perspective, we needed a tool that would allow an industry that hadn't changed for 50 years to become transparent and to prove to all of us that they're actually doing their job in collecting plastic.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is an amazing discussion. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I will end with a quote from my favorite person in crypto, one of my favorite people in crypto, Lynn Alden, who spoke at the Oslo Freedom Forum this week. I actually didn't verify that this was from that event, but she said, "Energy serves a very important role. It minimizes human governments. If you remove the energy component, you're recreating the legacy system, but on a blockchain." Sorry to end with that note, but I just wanted to build on what you were saying, Andre, about legacy systems and how we can change them. And that's another perspective. Had to bring in the Bitcoiner perspective because we don't have it on the panel. So thank you all so much. Sorry to cut our conversation short. Hopefully we can meet again someday.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia.
Shiti. Thank you, Raphaël. Thank you all for your time.